All right, guys, we're heading into August, and man, 96 degrees today. I know the water temperature is up. The local lake is 89 degrees out on the lake. The rivers are back down to normal levels. Clarity's a little bit, but when we get into August, you really want to start to consider to downsize your baits. It becomes a very, very tough bite, especially if you're fishing those inland river systems. Upper Potomac, Shenandoah, even parts of the New River, Maury River. If you're in the Mid Atlantic, Susquehanna, Allegheny, Clarion, French Creek, those systems, in August, can contribute to some tough days out on the water, especially if you're out on a day like today when it's 96 degrees. It can get kind of brutal. And the bass, when the waters come down, a lot of times your smallmouth get skittish. When the waters are down and it's hot out, they're on guard. So one of the most effective ways that you can kind of target these bass, especially in August when the heat and humidity is what it is, and the rivers are to really downsize your soft plastics, okay, and your presentations. I'm not so sure why more people. There are people who will fish these style of baits throughout the summer, because they are really, really effective. You can probably find hundreds of videos on YouTube with guys fishing the Helgramite, right? Which is kind of in the last few years really become a go-to for a lot of people that used to fish the craw imitators, right? The crawfish populations have kind of gone up and down with the floods and everything that's happened. The Helgramite populations, those bait presentations can continue to be very, very effective because they're small, right? They're really 3 inches or less. You very rarely see Helgramites on the market, more than 3 inches, because they just don't get that big normally, right? You can get them from like 1.5 to like 3 inches in that range, and you can present them any number of ways on the bottom, very, very effectively. But a lot of us have our like go-to, and I did a video on Bottom Up, and Bottom Up is really one of my new favorite Japanese brands. A lot of their stuff starts at like 3 inches, 3.5, all the way up to like 5 inches. And so sometimes that 3 inch, crawl presentation, like this is a Bottom Up bull's hog, okay, it's a 3 inch, is too big. Like you'll see the bites drop considerably from May, June, July, and then into August, right? And so many of those brands, up until recently, kind of started at like 3 inch, and then you had a big, massive push. At the same time, there was coming off of things getting bigger swim baits, 6 inches, 8 inches, 9 inches, 10 inches, right? You had a movement in Japan before the movement arrived in the United States to go smaller, okay? So now Bottoms Up and a lot of other brands have gone to these 1.5s to 2.3s, okay? That is a considerable difference in size, okay? And so everything needs to be downsized, right? The odd hook you're going to be using, maybe the weight you're going to be using, that I typically use for the 3 versus the baby bull's hog, okay? And so you can see how much smaller these these baby hogs are, right? And these obviously are craw imitators, right? But because they are the size that they are, okay, they're also very, very similar to the size of your Helgramites, right? That are in, most inland river fisheries and are highly effective, okay? And so you can use these any number of ways, downsizing everything in August, especially when it's this hot. And now you've got, and I talked about it in a previous video, and I got a bunch of messages from folks, you've got the weedless, really light weedless core tackle, right? And this is what that looks like, okay? So it's got a weed guard. It's very light, okay? This is a 1/16, okay? And the size of these, it's just perfect for these presentations, okay? Right? For these smaller 2.5s, okay? And obviously, This is a preferred hook size I like if I'm going to go finesse, really downsize everything, is that 1/0 or maybe like a 2/0. Now sometimes it's hard to find in certain rigs some of the smaller hooks, but you can easily just use a drop shot hook, okay, and you can do a whole bunch of different things depending on the situation that you want with these. Now, obviously, as I've spoken numerous times in the past with my 3-inch. I love to use a Jika rig, okay. And this, I believe, this is a 3/0, but usually I like to use a 2/0. I got 2/0 in the box, but this one's a 3/0, okay. And I like to use the Jika rig for anything that's like 3 inches, okay. And this, of course, is just another effective way to kind of get down. Now, obviously, you would want to go you would want to go with the Jika with a 1/0 hook, a really smaller hook if you're going to do that. And there's any number of soft plastics. You guys know, while I would prefer this on my inland, if I'm going tidal, then I'm going to opt for black and blue. Okay, I'm going to do presentations with various different colors of black and blue on the tidal Potomac. Okay, it's just a lot more effective than on the tidal Potomac, this color, than it is in, say, in the Shenandoah, Allegheny, and it's more the natural Tennessee shad, threadfin shad kind of colors, shiner in the Susquehanna, than black and blue. Doesn't mean you can't get bit, but black and blue, because of the blue crab, I think, in our tidal fisheries in the upper Chesapeake, it just becomes more of an, in terms of catch rates, a higher catch rate. So I'll go with these. These are old seismics. I love them. I still have a bunch of them. They don't make these anymore. It's a shame because they're just so effective. I know I've done previous videos, but I'll throw these on a Jika rig. Or if I'm going to punch like Greenway Flats, if I'm going to be punching grass in the tidal Potomac, or actually anywhere, there's some places on the upper Potomac now that pinned in below Old Dam 2 and Rivers Bend, up above Pennyfield, it's got a lot of grass. It's got really thick grass. Well, then I'll go use the punch and do it that way to get up underneath that grass in where there's little areas where, especially the smallmouth, but also some largemouth now, will be hanging out. So there's any number of rigs you can use to do that. You also can use the Tokyo rig like this, and obviously if you've ever seen a Tokyo rig, if you've ever used it or ever seen a video of a Tokyo rig, I guess, basically it's going to be off the bottom, raised off the bottom as the wire hits the bottom. It basically also, if you've seen it in the summertime, because when you're in low level conditions, you can see it. Depends if you have a sandy bottom or a rocky bottom. A lot of times it's like a crawfish because it creates that disturbance and that cloud of the substrate on the bottom of your river system. And so bass key on that, they know something's moving. And then I've seen some guys that are actually now wire cutting it in half, so it's actually smaller, so the bait is closer to the bottom. So interesting. It's an interesting number of things that you can do, but it's very, very similar. These rigs are all very, very similar in terms of how it's presenting that smaller size format. Now, as far as the Hellgrammite goes, it's a perfect August bait, okay? Because it's an easier small size meal. Doesn't matter what you're targeting. And so some of the ones that I prefer, out independent of the bull's hog, the baby bull's hog, okay, from bottoms up, which mimics the crawl, okay, more of a crawl type forage, in your river system. I like the HP bug from OSP, okay. It looks more, bug, but Hellgrammite. This is what it looks like. It's very, very Hellgrammite-y, okay, with the appendages. But this has a little bit of a thicker body to it, okay, than your typical Hellgrammite is very narrow and long, right, with all the appendages, right, and thin. This is a little bit thicker, the HP bug. But you can fish this just like a Hellgrammite. They're available in about a dozen or so colors here in the States that you can get. It's from OSP. But this one definitely is very crawl centric if you look at those colors on there. But then one of the other ones I really, really like, and it's been really, really effective, I'm probably down to my last pack or two, because I've gone through like 5 packs of these things, is the Valley Hill Devil Shaker. Okay? If you can find these are Valley Hill is a brand that's, probably harder to find than Bottoms Up is, in the United States now. Your specialty JDM shops, places like that. I don't think Bass Pro or any of the major like chain box stores carry Valley Hill. If you've seen Valley Hill in any of those stores, put it in the comments. Let me know. I just haven't. But again, they've got a lot of Finesse style baits. And again, this is the 2.3 Devil Shaker, and this is what it looks like. Okay, and it's got a lot of action to it for a little small bait. Which is why they crush it so bad. Look at all that on there, and you can just imagine this moving along the bottom, right? And all that water displacement with all the different. It's got different size. I love it because it's got thick appendages up top. Then it's got thin appendages. Then it's got a kind of a crazy like action for a little small bait. You could do any number of things. You can obviously present this again, like I said. You could present it with the Core Tackle weedless small 1/0 hover. You obviously could put it on a smaller, even ball, jig head, football, something like that. You could just simply place a nose hook. A lot of people are just drop shotting it, on a really, really small owner hook or something like that. I prefer Gamakatsu, really small ones. But the smallies can't lay off this stuff, especially when you're looking at summertime. Really tough bite, okay? Working it slow on the bottom, pausing a little bit, and then maybe jerking it up, letting it fall back down. That's where stuff like the Jika rig can come into play. Obviously you want to downsize the weight. This is a 1/4 ounce Jika rig, but like an 1/8, something, with a little bit of weight to it. But that's just enough to increase the fall rate a little bit. On off the bottom, and also if you jerk that rod, that it's got enough contact on the substrate to make a little bit of that puff bloom, right? Where bass are going to know something's moving around in there. It doesn't matter where you are in a part of the country. It could be shrimp, could be crawl, could be hellgrammite, could be anything. We've got here in the DMV right now. We're getting kind of like, if you've been out, not too many guys have reported on this yet that I've seen, but we've got this lanternfly thing happening, which is an invasive species, all on top of our water. Doesn't matter. Lakes, local lakes. I've heard, people are starting to report on it in Northern Virginia. I think it was Burke Lake in Fairfax, and then up in Germantown, in Maryland, different lakes, but also out on the river. Shenandoah, going up through West Virginia on the way to Harper's Ferry, Upper Potomac. You're starting to see these like the little red, winged lanternflies, and they're about the same size as this bug, okay? And they're sitting right on top of the water. So a lot of what people could do in August, because again, this is kind of like what's happening now with these lanternflies, is you can place bugs weightless. All that freaking fuzzy baits, from ICAST that are out. Tumbleweed, I think from Strike King, and all these things are now hitting the market. Z-Man's got one out. I don't know if it's hit the store shelves or not. But those kind of dicey, fuzzy things, you can just let them roll because of the lanternflies, right? It's the same thing as what we get when we get the cicadas, the cicada blooms, right? All that brood stock from some cicadas, same way on your inland river systems. Is you can just let these float on in and around the current in the seams, and they work just as effective as having a cicada bait, right? Because bass are getting, they know that those flies, and they know that stuff is showing up underneath the trees and all that stuff, and they can just come up for like a really, really easy meal. But these are just some of the options. Obviously, there's countless options that you can roll with. But you really want to, in August, you really want to go a little bit finesse, okay? Especially if you're fishing 2 feet of water, 3 feet of water in countless inland fisheries throughout our region, all the way from Virginia to Tennessee, West Virginia, Pennsylvania. The weight aspect of, like I said, this is a rattle rig, a rattle Jika rig, okay? It's got a rattle in there. your weight is really going to be, to me, your weight is always predicated upon the current of the seam you're fishing or the current you want to fish in and what its rate of flow is. If there isn't any, that's when I like to, definitely go with these 1/16ths and 1/8 and just, that slower rate of fall. Can you imagine, this falling and say 3.5 feet of water, falling, lower rate of fall, so a bass has a longer time to see it in its strike zone when it's kind of the water temperatures are almost close to 90 degrees. Their body is going through their biological, conditioning, right? So they don't want to be as active, but they also aren't going to pass on an opportunity, right? So you want to stay in that strike zone a little bit longer in August, in my opinion. For me, it's been my experience. Then something's going to drop like a brick, okay? Because if they're not really in that aggressive feeding up, which doesn't happen in August, you want that to stay in the strike zone. So you either want it. For me, what I have found is changing up your hook placements in your presentations, where they're like, okay, maybe the hover, and that presentation's not working, right? Maybe nose hooking, whatever you're fishing on the top, isn't working. You need to get it into the middle of the water column, right? Sometimes just rigging it to where it simply just falls horizontal, okay? Just falls like that. It doesn't fall like this, like a brick. It's in that water column like this, falling. That, a lot of times in August, is the most effective. Means if it's more of a finesse bite. Obviously, there's the top water bite is off, right? Early morning, it's now 9:30, 10 o'clock. It's now 95 degrees. It's August. You're gonna want to be fishing under the trees, a lot of times closer to that shade or in seams where there's oxygenated water, that's cooler water. You'd be surprised. It's like us. You'd be surprised. If it's 95 degrees out, but you find an area in the river that's a little cooler, that's where we even gravitate to, right? And so the bass are the same way. They're going to want to gravitate, to the cooler water, and usually that's where there's running water, okay? That's where there's current flow or seams or things like that and eddies, and that's where they'll sit. And you just want to drop that down, not like nose like this. I mean, definitely not this. The reason this comes into play is because you're, on more of a tidal situation. But obviously, a lot of inland rivers do have grass too. But you need to get through that grass to get to that break down below where where they are, and then you're just kind of working this in the bottom. So that's the necessity for a heavy weight in that regard. But if you're not dealing with that thick grass, it's more rock or sand or pea gravel or any of that kind of substrate. Then you do want to have a slower fall rate, okay? So they can see that, stay in their strike zone, okay? They don't have to chase it as much, okay? But it's seeing it, and then they come and get it, as opposed to something that's going straight down like a brick or a rock, right? That's what you really want to look to avoid in the month of August, as we get towards the later parts of summer. But again, that's just one tip that I can give you for August. I'm sure others may differ. A lot of people love to throw the crankbaits in August. They love, there's just any number of things, but a lot of it's predicated on your own river system, and what you're seeing. For me, where I am, my experience has been, mid-July to Labor Day, it's more finesse. If that topwater or that spinnerbait bite is not working, and they're on the bottom and they're not willing to come up and chase anything that's on the top water or upper part of the water column, you need to work the bottom, okay? And especially for smallmouth. In a Jika rig, a core tackle hover, a Jika rig, a Ned rig. Obviously, you could put this stuff on a Ned rig, okay? All of them are highly as effective on a Ned rig. Any number of things. These are also highly effective as trailers, okay? I've been experimenting a lot and have had some success. With the bottoms up baby on a H&H Koosball micro jig, okay, as a trailer. All right, I'll do another separate video coming up on these. This is a 4K Shiner Susquehanna Slayer. Okay, if you know anything about the Susquehanna River, it's Shiner color, Shiner patterns are your number one pattern. There's a bunch of events coming up in early August. I've already had people reach out to me. I think there's probably 5 or 6 events coming up in the next 2 weeks in August. Susquehanna should show out, and I've had a lot of people contacting me about these 4K Shiner baits, okay, because they are every bit, if not more deadly than your jackhammer baby jacks. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I'm just saying these things, for me, are more effective so far than the jackhammer baby jacks. You got anybody who knows, anybody who's followed any events on the Susquehanna, if you're a kayak angler, you know the Shiner jackhammer has probably been the go-to bait, other than like some weird events in a few years back where the cicada was the bait that won it. But consistently, that jackhammer or bladed jig, chatterbait, max blade, raid, blade walker. Blade walker is another one from Teckle. Adusta is another one that people do not talk about that has an incredible, Norris has an incredible hula chatter. People just don't talk about it. But here from Pennsylvania, this guy right here, H&H, check him out. H&H Custom Baits from Pennsylvania knows how to create baits to hit them smallies on the Susquehanna. Okay, but that's what you got to do. I mean, August is a tough month. If that jackhammer bite, that chatterbait bite is not on, a lot of people struggle. A lot of kayak anglers struggle. If that chatterbait's on, it's game on. But when that chatterbait shuts down, that bite shuts down, a lot of guys struggle. And the option that I would recommend is to go Finesse. Because if that chatterbait's not working, they're on the bottom. Okay? And you want to work Helgramites, you want to work crawl, like this bottoms up Bull's Hog, okay? The HP Bug from OSP, Devil Shaker. I got a whole bunch of options. Just send me an email, guys. I have no issue whatsoever with sharing with you the baits that, for me, that are the dominant smallie catchers on these river systems if you live in the greater DMV, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Eastern Tennessee, West Virginia, where I fish predominantly. But I imagine these will transfer over to a lot of your inland smallie fisheries, no matter where you are in the country. But that's just my 2 cents. We're looking forward to August. Again, check it out. If you're interested in some smallmouth bass fishing and, you got a really great river and it's just like it's where you like to do and you want to enter some competitive events, check out the online events, the monthly events, the Smallie Wars, Smallie Chaser River Bassin on Tourney X is where you can compete. You can compete against other people in your state only, or you can compete against people nationally in the chase events. Summer Chase is going on right now. Fall Brawl will start late September. And it's just a great little community. It's just a great way to be able, to get out on the river after work, or if you're off during the week and you can go out there, during the week and you can just catch a whole bunch of smallmouth and score them and meet people who have like passion, like-minded, no drama. Be part of a community that loves to do what you do. I mean, that's what we need to get back to. It's just like, it's an event, it's an online event, but it's not uber competitive where people are getting all twisted, okay? People are there to support you. I'm always there to support you. Send me an email. It's in the description. If you ever have any questions about any of these baits, if you got questions about what the tackle shop's going to carry, if you got questions about what the upcoming sales are going to be, which will be on social media platforms for sales releases, the email newsletter is going to be in the description here as well. Subscribe to that. It's free on Substack. Learn a whole bunch of stuff, meet new people, find out about some baits that, man, your buddy or people in your club or people down on the river you're fishing have never thrown, and which means your fish have never seen. Chances are your fish in your river system have never seen the Valley Hill Devil Shaker. They've never seen this action. And if they've never seen it, you're going to get bit. okay, you're going to get bit, all right? And that's what it's all about. It's all about celebrating the catch. It doesn't matter whether it's your first 12-inch, 14-inch smallmouth, or a 20-inch citation. It doesn't matter. Okay, a catch is a catch. Celebrate the catch. That's what it's about, especially in the summer when it's freaking brutally hot. I mean, it's kind of like a double-edged sword because you love to get out there. It's so hot. And it's like on those days, it's like, just let me catch 3 or 4 and you're happy and you go home happy, right? And in other parts of the year, it's like you want to catch 20, 25, 30, 35, and you want to catch some 18s and 20s. And if you don't, you're not happy. You know what I mean? It's a really, August is brutal, man. It's definitely a brutal dynamic. But again, appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, if there's any baits out there you want me to cover or you have any questions about, especially if they're JDM, please do not hesitate to reach out. Or if you're interested in fishing in the Smallie Chaser online monthlies that are nationwide coming up in August, hey man, reach out. Got any questions? I'll set you up. All right, guys.